My name is Molly McGlynn.
And I'm Lizz Bryce. For most of our careers, we've been deep in the weeds of charities and technology, but most interested in the people who use it. I'm SVP Community and Strategic Initiatives at Canada Helps, Canada's largest online donation and fundraising platform, and a charity ourselves.
And I run a small consultancy focused on the digital needs of small charities. We're your hosts of Digital Comfort Zone, a super not scary technology podcast for the people powering nonprofits in Canada.
In 2023, Canada Helps launched Charity Growth Academy to help you kickstart your digital transformation. Now we're excited to bring you this podcast that rarely talks about your tech stack and instead focuses on the people who make it work each day. So Anya, we recently released the 2023 Digital Skills Report, and one of the organizations who responded had this to say: "My organization is really behind. Our basic standards are lacking. We have Microsoft 365 subscriptions, but our users only utilize Word and Excel for basic, non-standardized documents. Underlying all of this is a resistance to technology. We print and make photocopies of everything. We get up and walk to the other side of the building to communicate. We need a culture change. But once that begins, I don't know where to start."
Oof. I mean, wow, there's a lot to unpack there. But like getting up and walking to the other side of the office? That sounds honestly horrible. But no, I'm actually just kidding. That's the only part of what he described that I feel like we should keep, right? Like in-person stuff in offices, those kinds of chats are great. But really, I mean, what the person is expressing there is like that feeling of not knowing where to start when you're faced with like a whole bunch of complex moving parts where everything seems to be broken and you just can't even imagine where to begin.
Yeah, I hear this all the time when talking to people working in charities. They're being asked to take on a massive project without necessarily having the skills or the resources, and they're doing it on top of their actual jobs.
Yeah, that's nuts.
And so there's no question that the work of transformation is complex and is interconnected with everything in the organization.
Yeah, I mean, when we think about it, like asking an organization to keep up, like our organization who responded to that survey feels like they're falling behind, it's really asking them to transform a complex and interconnected set of things, right? Like the technologies that their organization is using, the processes and habits for getting work done. Like before you might have printed and photocopied and walked things across the office, but now you save a document in a shared drive that's regularly backed up to the cloud. Like that's really different. And then not even to mention like transforming the people and the way that they work. That is really one of the most challenging part of the whole thing.
Just for anybody listening who feels scared of technology and the changes that we're asking you to make, I work in technology and I still find it hard to change my behaviors around using new tools or new processes. So this is an experience that we all have.
100%. And it's like, you know, have you ever done anything hard that you've been proud of without having to take a first initial step, right? Like, did you know everything about feeding a baby when your firstborn arrived? No. You just chose some steps to take and figured it out along the way, right? Like, did you cycle 100 kilometers when you took your bike out the first time this season? No, you went for a little ride around the neighborhood, right? Just to see if the brake still worked, right? When you started that certificate program, didn't you have to register for it first? And like, didn't you start at chapter 1? Like you didn't go straight to the exam, right? Taking these first steps is really important.
There's a quote I really like about not comparing yourself at the beginning to somebody who's already at the end.
Ooh, love that.
And I think it's really important to remember because knowing how to start is really simply knowing that you must start. That's the trick. There isn't actually a right way or a wrong way to start when you're feeling overwhelmed in front of complexity. The particular kind of paralysis that we can feel when a project is overwhelming can really only be addressed by making small movements towards the project.
That's it. Small, incremental movements.
Today, we're speaking to a filmmaker about how to get started on a complex project. Making a film is a really complex project that has a lot of interconnected challenges, competing priorities, human drama, and personalities to boot. Films are made by hundreds of people divided into departments, all with their own agendas and resource needs. Sound familiar?
Our guest today is an award-winning writer and director of film and television. Her most recent feature, Fitting In, stars Maddie Ziegler and Emily Hampshire. And Huffington Post called it an engrossing look at a flawed but earnest teenage girl in the process of redefining her new normal. Our guest is based in Los Angeles, where she's directed episodes of Grace and Frankie, Grownish, The Big Door Prize, and The Wonder Years. But I happen to know that she's always most at home in Canada. And I know this because I helped carry her out of the hospital in Montreal, where she was born. It is my little sister, Molly McGlynn. Hi, Molly.
Hi, Anya McGlynn, and hi, Liz.
And of course, having someone with Molly's experience is a real treat for our first episode. So I'm glad you were able to pull those sister strings to have her join us today. So welcome, Molly.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm honored.
So, Moll, we have a lot of things to learn from you as a director, as somebody who takes on really complex projects. So we're going to ask you some questions about some of those challenges that are involved when you're facing complexity and perhaps even feeling a little bit overwhelmed when you're trying to get started. So yeah, Liz, why don't you start off with the first question?
Maybe we just start with, what are the most challenging parts of starting a film? So assuming you've written the script or somebody's written the script, but you need to get going on actually making it a real thing.
Yes, the first step is getting a producer to get financing, because without money, you're not making a movie. So the first process of creating art is really business and commerce. So step one, before you can start thinking about your shot list or your casting, is finding someone who is going to help you find money. And that is a very, very complex process.
And so let's imagine that you've got your money secured, you've got the green light, and now you're like, oh, I have to make a movie.
Mm-hmm.
How do you break that down into manageable tasks? Because obviously you don't just like show up on set and you're like, okay, cool, let's make movies. How do you break it down from something so overwhelming?
The best way for me to thrive creatively is to understand restrictions and parameters and logistics. I don't want a blank check to make a film. I think real creativity and art needs some constraints. It forces you to think outside the box. So even as boring as it sounds, before I get into the creative prep, I work with many people, but primarily an assistant director who's going to show me what the schedule looks like for the film shoot day by day. And that is such an interesting process that is highly logistical. It's very often a very complex process of them planning what are called the boards, or a one line, that involve actor availability, locations, time of day as it correlates to the script. I mean, there's so many complex things that go into a board. And then I'll weigh in from my perspective, which is something like, if you have a sex scene, you usually want to schedule that top of day for actors because they aren't eating if, there's any partial nudity. So you're not going to want to put that at the end of the day, also because they tend to be really anxious about it. And then the rest of your scenes are going to be tampered with that anxiety. So I'm working with someone who's highly logistically focused, and I'm looking at the more sort of holistic creative needs of how to get what I want. But I would say the first process is always very logistical and boring. It's looking at housing and framework. And then you keep refining a schedule. And then much later in the process, then I'll start to figure out my shots and all of that. But that is so determined by a schedule, because
Right.
yes, I would like to have 500 shots of a scene and just be there all day and workshop with actors. But the reality is the restaurant closes at 2 hours and they've given you a deal on shooting there. Depending on the crew you have in terms of their experience and their speed, each shot, it will take between half an hour and an hour of setup and lighting. So I'm doing the math then. Once I get a sense of how quickly the crew works, okay, in 2 hours, I really only have 4 shots. Then if I have 2 cameras available, then I'm figuring out how to integrate the second camera into that.
Right. So it's like this like complex dance between like a plan, what happens on the day, the resources that you have, and being like the right mix of kind of nimble but also prepared.
Absolutely. Like, I generally say that I never look at my shot list once I'm on set. I mean, I might glance at it in the morning, but the work is in the preparation for me. And that means looking at the script to understand what a scene is about and what I'm trying to achieve. Because with directing, you're working with human beings, they're not robots or AI yet, thank God. And I can shot list based on a blocking and camera setups that I think work the best for me in the schedule. All it takes to throw that out is, if you're directing a breakfast scene and you say, okay, go get a cup of coffee, and they say, my character doesn't drink coffee, so I'm actually going to make a cup of tea, which requires them walking all over the kitchen and there's more shots. So it's like a creative choice like that from an actor who is a human being. I have to take into account what they're saying and integrate it into my needs. So it's a constant, like, as you said, dance, a push pull of what is my goal and how do I achieve that within a living, breathing thing that has complex parts that are changing all the time. So the best directors are flexible and clear on a goal.
So you obviously have lots of experience doing this. I'm a person who's never been on a film set, and there was a time when you weren't either. So how did you learn all this? How did you figure out how to get to this place where you knew how to manage the schedule and who to ask and what the intricacies might be of how an actor might feel about a shot?
That's a great question. It's the most expensive sort of hobby. Like, it's by the time you get the opportunity to shoot something, it's like you just started jogging and now it's the Olympics. Like, there is no, it's go time a lot through trial and error, to be honest. Like, I've had experiences where the day felt, I'll use the example with if you have partial nudity or a sex scene. Maybe the first time I did that, I don't know why the actor is in such a bad mood and anxious and sort of agitated the whole day. And then it just takes a more experienced AD being like, because they haven't eaten since last night because they have to take their shirt off. And it's like, oh, you put that into your toolbox. I always say to directors, every new project, you take what you've learned, but it's brand new. And on every single job, I'm humbled in the best possible way. I know what I'm doing, but I'm willing to learn. I'm teachable on every single job. I always add something to my toolkit and I go to the next one.
That's great. Oh, that's great. That kind of humility, I'm sure, serves you really well in your role and obviously like helps build a lot of trust and credibility with actors who are putting themselves in vulnerable positions. This is not unlike being a leader in a charity faced with a complex project. You have to build the ability for your team to trust you, to feel vulnerable in learning new things and being asked to try new things. So this is like, there's really interesting connections between what you're saying and what I'm sure our listeners experience. Can I ask you, Mo, what is the biggest, I mean, you've kind of touched on this a little bit, but like, is it the technical part of filmmaking is like, okay, well, what lens will help me get the look that I want, or the sound is not picking up in the right way, or is it more the people stuff, the actor who's like, no, my character is gluten-free, so I can't eat this sandwich in this
Right.
scene.
That is a great question. I mean, a technical issue can bone your day. I mean, if you shot the best take of an actor's performance and the like camera data card was broken or overloaded and you
Oh,
don't have it, like, that is disastrous. However, all of those technical things can be learned. I didn't know everything at first, but I got such great advice, which was tell your cinematographer what you want this to look and feel like. Your job as a director is to be able to communicate the goal, the feeling, the intention, and the other expert can come and say, okay, let me show you different lenses that maybe convey that. And so something that was totally intimidating to me then becomes a lot more clear when you also trust the people around you to bring their expertise. And over time, now I sort of know what different lenses convey. But the people aspect in any sort of human relationship based industry is very, very difficult. For me, I always tell new directors, if you want to be a director, especially in TV, like leave the beret and the monocle at home. Like I'm kind of like a fancy traffic cop. Like it's just like red light, green light, no, stay there. You're sort of
Yeah.
directing traffic a little bit. But I will say the thing that took me years of work to get the confidence to say that makes me feel like I'm really trusting my position as a leader is I'm more confident now saying, I actually don't know. Let me think on that and I'll get back to you. Instead of wanting to prove that I am capable and I will give a quick answer because I want to seem like I know all the answers. But I've done that in the past and then I'm wrong or I've changed my mind about it and I have to backtrack. And that makes me lose credibility instead of saying, maybe to an actor, I'm going to talk to the writer about that and I'm going to get back to you. That I feel like it's human to human. Whether they're a celebrity or not, it shows that you hear them and you are invested in providing the right answer, not necessarily the fastest. And yeah, there is a time crunch, but at the end of the day, you just have to communicate with the people you're working with confidence. And what I mean by that is the ability to use people around you to execute the goal.
That's great. When you're dealing with those things and maybe you're not having your best day and telling them, I'm going to take a pause and get back to you, or the equipment breaks and you're approaching this time crunch and really feeling overwhelmed, what do you do as sort of your next best step to get out of that spot?
Yeah, that's the challenge. I remember one shoot I was doing, it was a huge day filming a show at a college campus with 300 background running around in costumes. We had a techno crane, which is a very expensive piece of equipment. We had actors running. It was the end of the episode and one of the actors tripped on a background and twisted their knee up and banged it. And so that actor can't stand up. And they were also singing at the Super Bowl that weekend and just a whole big thing. And it was just like record scratch. All the producers were at the monitors. Everyone just didn't know what to do. And I had an AD saying like, we're out of this location in 45 minutes. And it was really like one of those tough moments. And I just said to my bosses, like the people who created the show, I said, give me 2 minutes alone and I'll come back to you with a plan. And I had to step away and it's like, take a deep breath. What footage do I have? What pieces do we need to tell the story? And I sort of made my proposed list and it was a little different from the script. So I went to them and I said, I know this was your original intention, but given these factors, we can't really execute this. This is what I'm pitching. And I think it makes sense, for the project because of X, Y, and Z. And they looked at each other and like, that's it, let's go, So especially for me, I know one of my limitations as a leader is I struggle with impulsive responses. So I have to work really hard to slow down and collect myself because once the marching orders are out, you have hundreds of people moving around off of something you said.
Oh, that's really great advice.
Yeah, that pause and plan.
Pause. It's all that meditation stuff we're listening to. Like,
yes,
take a deep breath before, it's like the reaction and then the response. All this personal development stuff that we listen to really applies to our work as well.
That's it. And it's like, we're not heart surgeons here. I mean, some people listening, if you're a heart surgeon, respect, and that's great. And you have a different decision-making framework. But for the rest of us, like, it's okay to take 5 minutes and be reflective about the question that's being asked or the pivot that's being forced upon you. But I really like how you suggested that you looked at, in that situation with the injured actor, what are the resources that I have to work with? What is done? How can we get to finished with what we have in the best possible scenario, given these limitations? And I think that's a really important takeaway.
That's exactly it.
To wrap up, do you have any closing wisdom or best advice that you would give to someone who is trying to start on a complex thing and is feeling paralyzed and like, this is so big and complicated that like, I don't know how to get out of my own way?
Yeah, it's actually some advice you gave to me vis-a-vis a family friend when you were finishing your PhD and how overwhelming that was. I think they told you break it into pieces like even someone not intelligent can do. An idiot can do. I was trying to be nice about idiot, but yeah, break it into pieces an idiot can do. And when I am looking at 100 pages of a script, I'm just, it's like I can't think about it all at once. What can I do? Even sometimes the scene is too big. So I'll say, I'm going to take it beat by beat, sentence by sentence. What is happening in right here? And I got great directing advice, which was if you don't know what to do, write down what you see. Doesn't even need to be in languages of shots. Like break it down into the most basic thing. And that really helps. But I will say also, in order to create or start something, the key word is start. It doesn't even matter if it's all wrong. I just wrote a new script and I got some notes and I realized the whole thing is wrong and I threw it out the window. But at least I have a starting point and I wouldn't have known where I needed to go without exploring that option first. So much of when I don't know where to go in a script, there's a great suggestion, which is write down what doesn't happen. So if you're stumped on a complex problem of planning, try the opposite.
What do I not have to worry about?
Yeah, exactly. The other thing, this is very specific. I struggle with ADHD. I can get hyper-focused or really distracted. I use the Pomodoro technique, which is like a browser extension. So I work in 25-minute sprints and then I take 5 minutes off. And then after 4, you can go for a walk or something. And even if you don't have ADHD, like all of our phones are always beeping, there's always something going on. So break it down into manageable chunks of time. And it is mind-blowing what you can get done in 25 minutes with no distractions. It's way better than 4 hours of half working, checking your phone, checking your emails. The other last thing I will say is don't go to your computer to think. You know, if you go for a walk, record in your notes apps, brainstorming, and then transcribe it. The pressure of staring at a document or a plan is just for a lot of people, too stressful. So move your body when you think, at least in the more abstract, bigger picture.
Oh, that's a great piece of advice. And you know, that resonates with me 100%. I love a walking meeting or an opportunity to sit around a desk with a big piece of paper and some markers and just like draw some stuff out and see where it's going to take you, right?
Yes. And I don't know your industry as well as you do, but I can imagine like if there was a project that you saw or heard about that worked really well, case studies are super useful. Like I'll use it for other films that I love and then break down why something worked and how can you take those elements and apply it to your goals and your project.
That's a great idea too. Full of good ideas, she is.
So many good insights from Molly in that discussion. Things that I didn't know about filmmaking, but so much that can apply to the charitable sector.
Oh, yeah. I just don't even know where to start. I mean, let's talk about the concept, speaking of starting, of just starting something.
That is basically our mantra. Just start somewhere.
That's it. And it seemed really clear to me that like the difference between being a filmmaker who gets films made and one who doesn't is learning to be prepared for when the opportunity strikes.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So having that good plan in place, having that creative vision in place and being ready for when the opportunity arises that you can turn that into a reality. And I think that's really important for charities. I think sometimes we don't think about being prepared for when those resources are available. So even though you might be thinking about digital transformation as something you can't afford now, you can certainly start on the planning and sort of table setting for it so that when it is included in your strategic plan or you do get that grant, you're ready to go.
But the other thing I really like that she said is the planning's really important, but so is the experience. And so you might go through doing some of this work and it might be successful, maybe it won't, but then you take what you've learned and you apply that learning to a new situation. And so it might be doing it differently or better next time, or it might just be evolving the work that you've already done. I like that I wrote down, you take what you've learned, but it's brand new.
Yeah. One other thing that I think Molly hit on that was really relevant for our charity listeners is communicating the goal as the leader, right? That it's not necessarily the film director's job to do everything. You know, they're not going to be there holding the camera unless it's a really, really small budget film. But by and large, the director, and as such, our charity leaders listening, your job is to express what needs to be done, to hold that goal in mind, and then to rely on those people around you who have specific tasks and specific expertise to do the work that you expect them to do, right? While constantly checking in with them about like, okay, are we still aligned? Do we still have our goal in mind? Are we still working towards that? And I think that that's a really critical part too when you're feeling overwhelmed. It's like, you're not going to have to do all of this together. But, once you have that goal and that vision established, it's going to be a lot of different people who are contributing to the success.
And of course, we can't talk about charities without talking about money. And
True.
So Molly kicking off with talking about art really being about money and business. It's so much of you've got things you're passionate about and things that you're trying to put forward in the world, and funding that is hard. And so how do you either find the money, and doing this work is really an important part about how you might be able to find the money either for this work or how you better operate more efficiently so that you can then have more money to do the work, and also doing the work with the money you've got at the time. And so that might be just a little bit of work to start, and then you grow that work as you get more money.
That's it. Absolutely. Like very few filmmakers start out with like a multi-million-dollar budget, right? Like Molly was saying, it's like the most expensive hobby when you're first starting, right? Because it's like I remember Molly making her first short film, and she was like going around to Sobeys and asking them for gift cards so that like she could buy snacks for the people who were going to be on set. And she's the director and writer, right? So it's like, sometimes you're starting off really humbly with the small resource that you have, but you're nonetheless making progress, right? You're starting where you can start. And that's how you make incremental progress that you can then build on, right? That was a really great takeaway too.
Well, that was a great first episode. And thank you for listening to Digital Comfort Zone. We hope we kept it fun and not scary, and there were some great takeaways from today's episode that should help you feel more motivated and excited to get started on your digital transformation path.
Absolutely. You got this. The best thing that you can do right now to get started on your journey is check out the Charity Growth Academy. You can start an assessment today, can help you set a baseline, get some recommendations as to what things you can get crossed off your list right away. No delays. You can do that this minute. No excuses. You got this.
And thank you to our amazing guest, Molly McGlynn, our podcast producers, Christian Robillard and Richard Villeneuve at Purpose Podcasting. This podcast has been a production of Charity Growth Academy by Canada Helps. Support for Charity Growth Academy has been generously provided by MasterCard ChangeWorks and MasterCard Impact Fund.
And if you really enjoyed today's episode, please consider leaving us a 5-star review. If you didn't like this episode, give us a 5-star review anyway.